He's how old?
He just turned 10.
Ten?
Oh,
Best years ahead. You'll know nothing for about a decade.
bye-bye.
Okay, we are live this morning, and it is a Thursday morning, Senate Transportation Committee, and we're going to discuss Replace Your Ride program, bike incentives, and Patrick Murphy is with us this morning. So good morning, thank you for coming. And tell us what's up. Subject.
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Chair. For the record, my name is Patrick Murphy with the Vermont Agency of Transportation. I know it's listed as Replace Your Ride and e-bikes. I have some more information on the incentive programs generally. I know you heard yesterday from Capstone on Mileage Smart. So I have some more information about the incentive program for new PVs as well, because that's where a lot of the changes have been proposed for this legislative session. But basically, the main thrust of what we've proposed for this legislative session is to codify some of these programs that have changed from session to session, but have grown into their own for the most part. So we'll go through some of those changes and feel free to jump in with questions.
Okay, go right ahead.
So this is our focus here today. I think we've gone through, at some point, we're up now to about 8,900 registered vehicles, with about half of those all electric and just under half plug-in hybrid vehicles. Down below, it shows you when the new programs first launched. So it was December of 2019 that we launched the new plug-in electric vehicle incentive program. Mileage Smart came in about September of 2020, and then Replace Your Ride was launched back in September of this past year.
Patrick, did you give this to?
Yes, yeah.
Just up on the website? I don't see it. I can't get it. Well, I can see it. Here's. Just for those times where the screen is blocking.
Sure, sorry.
That's okay. Jeez.
So this gives you a sense of sort of how effective some of the incentive programs have been, what has been the impact. So since the first iteration of the new plug-in electric vehicle program, basically from calendar year 2020 to the end of 2022, the incentive programs have been responsible for over a fifth of all the vehicles registered here in Vermont. And for the last 2 quarters, so from July until the end of December of 2022, it's been just over a quarter of all the vehicles have been incentivized to the state.
Fairly significant percentage.
Yes. Yeah.
Is this something that's going to go on for a long time, or is it, do we know the future of this program?
How many rounds?
Right. So we have, as it says here, we've got $12 million that the legislature authorized last year, and we have taking away the 15% for administrative funds, and the incentives that have been issued. We're at about $9 million left. So we expect it to last for at least another year, and it depends on, obviously the level of uptake among Vermont. Sure. It is expected that, at some point the private market takes over and these become very competitive. I'll show you a slide.
Federal money also, federal incentives too?
Yes, yeah. Yeah.
So they go, okay.
Yeah, we'll dive into that.
But those are contingent on volume. And I was looking at the VW and the other.
Ready for it?
Well, it depends on the 7,500 is only available as long as the volume of sales is under a certain amount to the state, something to that effect.
No,
They
it's,
changed
It's, yeah, that was under the old iteration of the program, so it was capped at 200,000 vehicles, I think,
Yeah,
per manufacturer.
that's a federal, right?
That's federal, and that's changed as of August 16th, 14th, whatever it
I mean,
was.
I've got more time to drive my old car now.
There's hope
Yeah.
for Senator Kitchell, yeah.
You've got until 2032, so
You can make it that long,
2030.
another 10 years.
I had to go get my mileage, it's 169,000 and 8 miles. I don't think I'm gonna make it.
You see, there was a guy that drove his car 1,000,000 miles, and he got a free car from one of the.
So you
Is
can.
that a Mercedes or whatever? I remember that.
No, well, it was in the hurricane.
Oh, yeah.
He hit 1,000,000 miles with it. Same dealer, same car, everything. He owned it day one. So they gave him a brand new one with a charge. 1,000,000 miles on one car.
Well, Jane, you don't have very much further to go, do you?
Yeah.
You gotta pray for a hurricane.
Okay, go right ahead.
sure. So this gives just a summary of what, to give you a sense of how many incentives are going out over the course of a given year. So this is looking at federal fiscal year 22. And it also speaks to the need to kind of pick up the pace in terms of the incentives, especially for electric vehicles, in order to meet our targets. So $2.67 million was issued over that course of the year. There were all kinds of issues that you've heard about in committee before around supply. And the federal program has not kicked in at that point. So we expect that there's going to be more happening on that in the next year or so.
And what did you just say, how much was left? Or how much you're expecting to be left at the end of fiscal year 23?
So there's about 9 million left as of now.
So it's 3 years, maybe, if we go 3 million a year.
Yeah, so originally I think the intention was that the $12 million would last 3 years. And ideally, obviously, for climate reasons, we would actually expend that more quickly than that. But it's dependent on a number of factors. So this gives you where we are now, where we need to be according to the modeling that was done for the climate action plan. So over the next 3 years, making up a pretty good ground. It doesn't mean that all of these vehicles have to be incentivized by the state, because we, as we talked about, we expect that people begin to see these electric vehicles as competitive, both because of the infrastructure that we're building out, but also continuing trend towards price parity.
Can you, Drive Electric was referenced on the other slide.
Sure.
Are they involved in the incentives? Can you just describe their role here?
Sure. So they had been involved in the prior iteration of the incentives, where they were helping to manage things with the distribution utilities. Then we transitioned over to a third-party nonprofit organization that conducts a lot of this work in other states. It's called the Center for Sustainable Energy. When that happened, Driver Electric Vermont's role became as a subcontractor to Center for Sustainable Energy to conduct the outreach on behalf of the main vendor to all Vermonters. So that's their role in this, is public outreach and getting out the word about.
In the website.
And so then, separate from that, there is the $2 million that was appropriated to Drive Electric Vermont last year, and that's expected to last the 3 years. And that's to do a lot of the other vehicle electrification strategies, among which is maintenance of the website, providing technical assistance to municipalities and to multi-unit dwelling owners, and then to fleets. So they'll be doing a lot of work on helping fleets make that transition too. So
Can I ask you a quick question on the bikes? Sure. We don't have any requirements for the bikes as far as certification of the bike, like that they be UL listed or something like that?
Of the e-bikes? I don't believe there's a certification requirement, but it does have to be a new bike. It can't just be a bike that's retrofitted. So that would come with that certification, and it has to meet the definition of in statute of an e-bike.
Because there's been reading articles about all the fires in New York City from the e-scooters and e-bikes catching fire when people plug them in.
Yeah.
Really?
So I'm
Something about the.
Yeah, a lot of them, but a lot of them are not UL listed. They're just really cheapy kind of, and then sometimes people also swap batteries around.
That's dangerous. Huh?
Yeah, we've had several apartment buildings, stores burned to the ground because of that battery.
a lot of cases
In New York
that's
City.
Oh, and then-
There's a lot of the
People use it.
the delivery people, there's an army of delivery people that
Oh, I
have
know.
scooters in the city now.
so some of that is also bikes that are being retrofitted with inappropriate motor sizes and that kind of thing. So
I just wondered if we might want to look at requiring it that they be UL listed.
it's a good point. And I think
But we're doing the e-bikes through Replace Your Ride.
That's one way, but I think there's also just a separate incentive that anybody, you don't have to go through Replace Your Ride to get it.
there had been, so we launched in,
So there are two avenues to it then.
To replace your ride, you gotta get rid of a car.
I know.
How many people get rid of cars?
Yeah.
Like, it's an option.
so we did launch in July of this past year, and all the money was then subscribed within 6 or 7 weeks. So that piece is no longer an option for people. So what we were looking at when we made recommendations to the House Transportation was the current used vehicle market, issues around supply constraints and price inflation. So how would we address price increases? We have caps in place that kind of have eliminated some eligibility for vehicles. Looking at the longer term market projections, how do we expect things to kind of layer in with the Inflation Reduction Act and other opportunities there, and the local utility incentives, and then the charging plans that we have for the next few years. So we propose to increase the MSRP caps, the base MSRP caps, to be more in line with what the federal tax credits provide for. But we know that we need, for both climate reasons and to just help make the transition more possible for lower income households to build that used vehicle market, we need to front load a lot of these incentives. So we're looking at increasing the incentive amounts for the new PV program, increasing the number of eligible participants. So inflation over the past 3 years has been about 15%. We'll show a slide that looks at how the Capstone's Mileage Smart program is allowed to evolve from year to year because it's based on state area median income versus the incentive program for new PVs, which is just a fixed amount. And so then looking at thresholds for qualifying households, and then providing some flexibility to the agency to deal with all these different variables
So
that we
these
face.
recommendations were included in the
That's right.
language you gave to the House.
That's right.
And the bill that they passed out, did they follow your recommendations, or are they different than what you've identified up here?
They pretty closely followed what we've recommended in 479.
Close, meaning not quite?
Well, the agency didn't include a recommendation for e-bikes to continue, except through the Replace Your Ride program and except through the Electrify Your Fleet incentive. But, you know, we've provided, if there is the appetite to move forward with that, we've provided some recommendations on how that the program might be run more effectively.
So did the House put more money in for e-bikes?
So there was more money put into budget adjustment, 100,000
100,000.
coming
No,
out
no,
of,
I'm talking about the budget here.
yes, and then in the FY24 budget, it's another 50,000.
And the language that you said should go with any additional funding, is that in the bill?
Yeah, so
Okay.
what we had discussed that would make it a more effective program, they've included language for that. Yeah,
I just wanted to make sure what was or was not.
sure, yeah.
Purpose of incentivizing bikes, I mean, you're not helping the environment, but it's just to replace the car. I mean, the less mileage on the car, you think, is that?
The purpose is, the intent is to reduce vehicle miles traveled in a vehicle, and by
If they
doing
use-
so,
If they use their bike more than a car.
I wonder how many people do that.
Yeah,
You know,
that's
yes, I wonder how many people are just buying it
right.
to get
For pleasure.
a free bike.
so we can get into some of that data. I think it's clear that no matter what, with an e-bike, you can reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But there are two things that we have to look at. This first, is the incentive the thing that is really creating that purchase to happen? So is it essential to the purchase? And if it's not, then that's a problem. The second is it cost effective relative to what else we could do with limited funds?
Yeah.
So can we obtain the greenhouse gas emissions reductions that we need more effectively
Different
through
way.
this
Yeah,
or through some other
That
way?
would be my question.
So-
I just wonder about that.
So
I
what,
just wonder how many are sitting around in a closet, never to be charged again.
Or they're purely recreational.
Yeah, the
Right.
recreational, I agree.
So rather than, so,
I never could see that incentive in bikes, because to me, it's it's a pleasure, and that's fine. I don't have any problem with that. I don't discourage it, but I don't think they're gonna replace cars. I mean,
well, in some cities they do,
Yeah.
in some areas they do.
Or could just reduce some trips, but not.
But is it
get rid of
worth,
their
is
stuff.
it worth the money?
Yeah, that's a good question.
That's the question.
Yeah.
Is it worth?
Is this the most cost-effective
Yes,
way of
that's
reducing
right. That
carbon
would be
emissions?
my question.
Or are we simply, a lot of people that ride bikes as they age like e-bikes?
Yeah,
But they're written more, not to avoid,
If you sold 100 of them, would
A trip or-
5% or 2% or 10% would use it instead of a car? And in Vermont, you wouldn't see it too much, I don't think, unless it's Burlington, something like that.
maybe around here.
Okay,
so, so this is looking at what's expected. This is from a report that came out just in January of this year about where it's expected that electric vehicles reach price parity with gas-powered vehicles. And so that's around between 2027 and 2028. That's because of decreasing costs of batteries over the past few years. Cost of batteries have increased for the first time in about a decade, but they are now starting to expected to decrease over the next several years. And that is what accounts for the majority of the declining prices for vehicles.
Did
For
you
electric
tell us
vehicles.
BEV,
So battery electric vehicle,
all right, battery, I was like, okay,
all electric
all electric.
vehicle basically, and then internal combustion engine, it's ICE and plug-in hybrid electric
Yeah, I
vehicle.
got the plug-in.
Yeah.
What's the BEV?
So that's without factoring in the Inflation Reduction Act. When they did the analysis with the Inflation Reduction Act that provides up to $7,500 worth of tax credits, they projected then to reach price parity somewhere between 2024 and 25.
And did they change the tax credits, and now it's basically say refundable, saleable, like that you can get it off the price, at the dealership. You don't have to have the tax liability and wait.
Right, so that doesn't take effect till January 2024.
And that's the issue of has to be made.
So it's not a
there.
tax credit, it's a credit.
Basically a rebate.
It's like, rebate.
So basically the dealership is taking the tax credit on behalf of it and then passing that savings through.
But that's the one where they still have to do some of the rules about what vehicles qualify, because they have to be made in the United States.
So the IRS has to issue and expected in the next few weeks to issue the guidelines around that. In the meantime, there are vehicles, as long as they're manufactured in North America, there are vehicles that could receive that $7,500 maximum, because it's not based right now on battery components and the critical mineral content. It's based just on battery size.
And the ones that were kicked out of the program for having already sold too many, those got moved back in.
Yeah. So the Teslas, Toyota was on its way or had just been kicked out, and the Chevy Bolts, they become qualifying again. So
Because they'd hit the targets, sales targets.
right. So as long as they're manufactured in the United States.
So you have low, medium, moderate, and high for all electric vehicles. Tell what is the difference between low, moderate, and high?
So this is looking at
Prices.
this is looking at different scenarios based on the inputs that they have, so that if they adjust some of the inputs, basically they could be looking all the way at price parity, in 2023 of this year. So that's a highly optimistic scenario, and so that's why I've actually put the arrow closer to 2025, where I think you're going to see more people taking advantage of this in 2024, where it does become refundable at the point of sale and when there's more supply available. I think so those are, think about them in terms of optimism. About
Conservative to
Yeah.
the most.
Right. Sorry for that. So this gets into a bit of the details about the Inflation Reduction Act. I won't go through it all, but basically, you have 3 different filing statuses that are reflected here. And so we've, in our language, adopted these 3 filing statuses, although at different, obviously different income levels.
A lot of states do this. Is this such common in other states, incentives?
Not all states have incentive programs. There are certainly several states that do. Vermont is the only one that has its incentive programs that are exclusively income sensitive. So the state of Massachusetts has a $2,500 incentive, but that's for anyone.
Didn't Oregon just kind of run on their program because it was a little too popular?
Oregon increased their amounts for lower income households, and I believe they've just run out of funding as of the beginning of March or something.
Instead of stealing catalytic converters, they'll be stealing batteries.
Yeah.
So the other piece to this is that there's now a used vehicle tax credit as well. So for vehicles that are $25,000 or less, they'll be able to stack $4,000 incentive next year with Mileage Smart up to $5,000, which will make a real difference, because you're getting nearly to, especially if you add in utility incentives, nearly half the vehicle's price or more. And then there's some more interesting things around commercial clean vehicles that does not have the same complex battery component and critical mineral requirements. So municipalities and other state agencies and tax exempt organizations will be able to take advantage of that as well, up to $7,500 for a light duty vehicle. This gives you just a sense of some of the other programs that are being managed by Center for Sustainable Energy and how Vermont compares. So we're pretty generous in terms of what we offer and amounts, but not so much in terms of the MSRP caps. And we're one of the few states that offer.
But this is still income sensitive as far as on the new ones.
This is income sensitive. And so in that situation where you do have income guidelines where only sort of people who meet those can participate, the caps become less important than in other states because you have natural caps in place. I think they're still important, but they're not as important.
MSRP caps.
Right.
Those guidelines are the previous slides that you had when you're showing on the new, on the used ones, that those same price income guidelines are the same.
Those are for the federal tax credits,
Okay.
but I'll show you right in just a couple of slides what ours are for the state. And so this is just a sense of the activity of the past. This was a 5-month period that we're actually doing pretty well in terms of where our incentive
Occupation.
program is. Yeah, when you factor in how small a state we
I
are.
didn't realize the population of Connecticut was so much less than Massachusetts.
Yeah, I actually have a buddy there, and we were talking about that the other day, and I said, there's no way that's right. And so we looked it up together, and he said, I told you.
That's,
Half.
yeah, you wouldn't think that.
What was that bottom table?
Oh, sorry. So this is just actual numbers, volume. So in this naming convention, the standard rebate is just the moderate income households and enhanced rebates for.
So that's just Vermont, the bottom.
Yes, yeah, that's right. So these are what we've proposed: increasing the base MSRP caps, increasing the limits for income to adjust for inflation, and add this separate head of household category, which had previously been tied to single filers, but there's an increased need to. There are just increased costs. Basically, it implies that you're caring for another individual, whether it's a child or elderly parent or
So
someone
it'd
else.
be a different income if you're head of household.
Right. And that is to reflect, again, the federal tax credit program.
But is the federal tax credit income, that has a cap too?
It has a cap, but it's a much higher cap.
150.
It's 150,000, I think, for the used vehicles, and for individuals for the new vehicles. But 300,000, I think, was the household cap for the new vehicles, which is, would capture most of Vermont if we implemented that. These are eligible models. We proposed to have the language that you all have from the transportation bill actually increase that cap from 50,000 as proposed to 55,000. And that was to not have to come back each time to figure out how we should adjust for cost increases. And then we proposed a 60,000 cap for the fleet incentive because we wanted to make sure that other utility vehicles or some of the light duty trucks that are now becoming available, that they would be able to be incentivized.
So what the red, the ones that are crossed out, are because it's over the 40?
Yes,
Because this is the current,
this is the current,
because everything's at based on 40,000.
because it's based on 40,000 for the plug-in hybrids and
Can't get a
45.
Ford Lightning truck then.
Not yet,
The
originally.
one that
But your
Tesla,
Mustang's off too.
Good.
I know, I can't buy another. What, the Tesla Model 3, isn't there one that's under 40? Isn't there 30?
You just had a price increase, decrease,
Decrease, yeah.
right?
So the Model 3 does qualify.
So
That's what down in 28. So it didn't qualify after October 5th, 2021 because the price had changed. Tesla's a tricky one because they're always changing their prices.
Right. So I didn't read the little note there.
Yeah.
So that's So even though it says 43.9, it
Because it-
qualifies because it's actually lower after a certain date.
Because the cap is at 45,000 for an all electric vehicle right now.
So why because the RAV4 is a plug-in
It's,
hybrid.
it's a plug-in hybrid. Yeah.
Same with the country.
Right.
And
I'm gonna have to go to school for 2 years, and you said, you figure out all these things. I
You know,
can't-
I'm just wondering whether we should try to get rid of having a specific figure and do some kind of market adjustment and allow you to do it outside.
Especially
Describing
because
it through statute, and it's such a dynamic market.
we're moving it into the statute or proposed to.
Although this is a program that we think we're gonna phase out as the market matures. So, but you're proposing to make it part of the statute?
We don't know what the duration is going to be, honestly, and the tricky part right now is we have made so many changes over the past 4 years to the program. It's really hard to follow the changes because they are in session law and you gotta go and look and find them and parse them together. And so this, like, at the very least, gets everything consolidated into one format for us, so anybody can sort of know where we stand and who's on first.
How does the dealer keep up with this stuff?
They have a lot of technical assistance
Oh,
from
I
our
was
electric
gonna say,
providers.
how would they ever
But
figure this out?
we had originally brought forward language that, because this flexibility issue is a real thing, and we're concerned that, that sometimes the 18-month period, 12-month period plus technical startup can strain us in terms of being able to be responsive to the market. So we had brought forward some of that JTAC notwithstanding language that we used on the DMV modernization and that.
Well, I don't want to notwithstand, I would like to establish a base
Yeah.
and give you authority to adjust using some defined methodology
Yeah.
so that it can happen without going back and updating the statute. And we've done that before. So it's notwithstanding anything.
Right.
It's basically saying, this is the base, and then you can adjust it. And you tell us what's the best methodology to use. And then that gets out of that having to come back, every time.
So maybe we'll put some language together for your consideration.
We've done that with other things, where, for example, federal rules are gonna change. And so we allow, to modify, to conform to the, whatever federal regulations come down. And it saves going through, because legislative process is not very nimble.
No, it's not.
Um,
And I think the opposite of the price cap needing to be higher, at some point, the price cap is gonna need to be lower, probably as the prices of these vehicles come down.
Yeah. So that's, I think that's where we were, we had this discussion in House Transportation, and we want there to be caps for a couple of reasons. One, so that the incentives are more effective. 1,500
I'm
or
not proposing elimination of
No,
the cap.
sure.
but-
But then there is like the trends I showed in the prior graphs about where we're expecting to see price parity. That's going to ideally bring the cost of those vehicles
Well,
down.
the cap can be adjusted either up or down based on the market. I
Well,
mean,
and there's another complexity that's gonna come into play with that, being in that business for 20 years. What's gonna happen is that they're not gonna lower the price, but they're gonna offer rebates above and beyond what we're offering here today. They're gonna offer rebates to encourage people to buy this model over that model, as you have more competition.
I
So
guess
I
we could say net of rebates or something.
so I wonder where that will come into play, because those things are fluid, they change with what they have for inventory in the pipeline, on the ground, and all of that. So there will be some complexity there.
Is that something you can
Yeah, we'll go
propose some language?
Absolutely.
Very, very, very confusing. Wow. I don't know anybody can figure all this out. You go to buy a car at a dealer, they got a lot of things to do.
So that last slide was
So
the
this
cars
is,
that have received the incentive
yeah,
in
so
Vermont.
this is just give you a
Just
sense of
this
the
year.
models. This is
Just this fiscal year.
this past, this fiscal
I mean,
year.
the Chevy Bolt is popular, isn't it?
You know, it's just so funny too, because when that first came out, boy, they pound the heck out of it, but now it's really,
My he's on his second one, he likes it
you
a lot.
know,
Yeah, but when you add in the Bolt and the Bolt EUV, it's really dominating this sales.
you said the difference between the Bolt and the
The EU is just a little bigger, so it's off the ground, but I think the cargo space is almost the same even.
It's just a little bit higher.
It's just a little bit higher, ahead or something.
The rear seating is just a little bit more leg room than,
I also
It's a little
think,
longer.
I also think the inventory itself, I think Bolt was had more inventory than the rest of the electric.
So this is how we've proposed to change the income guidelines there. And you see, it's just raising it from 50,000 up to 60,000 for an individual, keeping that 100,000 cap.
Who's an individual who's not head of household?
Who's not,
Who files as an individual, a single individual?
as head of household, it's like
Not-
single parent or someone who is.
Married, but they're gonna file both, no, but,
No, that would be married for,
no, you can file a single, you don't have to file jointly.
It's married filed separately, but you're
Right.
still married.
so
But that's the bottom line.
head of household would be a single individual who's not married, who's either caring for children or for some other, an elderly parent or someone.
So I'm looking at what category do I fall in? I guess the top one, right?
Wealthy.
Or the bottom one. Filing as a
I don't think-
qualifying widower.
I'm looking at that chart, I don't think you're getting a rebate.
Yeah, there's that issue.
That's a good analysis.
You're a full price type of girl.
All right. No, oh, that's only for that Vermont ones.
Yes, this is for Vermont. Yeah.
Federal tax credit, much higher.
Oh, good.
There's a,
I guess you're right, Senator Ingalls.
Your
I'm
brother.
not complaining.
Your brother-in-law will pitch in any car you want.
I know. he
So
will.
this is just
He'll even
where-
Deliver it to my door.
it's like with my brother in the fencing business, I'll say, hey, you get the family discount, it only costs you 15% more.
Yeah, that's right.
So this is where there's some divergence between the Miley Smart numbers, which update every year, and the incentive program for new PVs. So you could have a single individual who's making 52,000 or just under 52,000 and qualify for the used vehicle program, but not for the incentive program for new PVs. You can have a family of 5 qualify for Miley Smart, but not for the new PV program. If we actually want the opposite, we want the people who most need it to be able to get the used vehicles, and we want anybody who can, because of these incentives, purchase a new vehicle to do so, so that the folks that really need to purchase a used vehicle, because that's their only option, have that down the road. But we just need to build more inventory of used vehicles, which is
That's
how
why you
most
want to-
people,
That's why the justification for your suggested changes.
right?
And they're in the house.
Yes, yeah. So this gives you a sense of how many households, filing households within Vermont qualify under the old rules. It was 75%, and now it would be up to possibly 78%. And that's to keep up with inflation as well. So this is based on tax data that's almost, well, a couple of years old. But what we're proposing to do is also increase the amounts for Replace Your Ride. What we've found is there's been little interest because there aren't, given the used vehicle market right now, 15-year-old vehicles can still maybe get about $3,500 or $4,000. So people are more likely to pursue that option as a private sale versus trading their vehicle in for inflation rise. So the increase there from 3,000 to 5,000 is to get more interest in just trading in the vehicle altogether and having that replaced with a cleaner option,
And a cleaner option,
being a plug-in electric hybrid or plug-in fully electric
Or
vehicle.
and they have to get rid of their old vehicle.
They have to get rid of their old vehicle, and then there are also these other options in the places in Vermont where it makes more sense, where people can piece together public transit and biking and walking. So we've developed this option to include things other than just cars. So people can get a prepaid mobility card, and this can be used at any of the businesses that are whitelisted here in Vermont, where they provide some sort of transportation service.
Well, let me ask, if you're looking at, because there's a lot of discussion, at what point environmentally, is it still better to be driving your older vehicle? As long as you possibly can and get all the use out of it, as opposed to trading it in, even for an EV, simply because of the manufacturing costs and all the other external issues. So is the 10 plus the break even in terms of where that environmentally is better? Because I have a 2010 Honda Civic, and which is obviously more than the 10. But I've been under the impression, and I think I've been told, it's a lot better for me to continue to drive that vehicle as long as I, feel it's safe and serviceable, as opposed to trading it in for even a new electric
All
vehicle.
depends on your repairs. Some of those repairs are costly.
Well, I haven't had much in the way of repairs.
So I think it really depends on the vehicle model. There are some vehicles where, so you're looking at two things. You're looking at overall emissions, which include manufacturing emissions.
Right.
But then you're also looking at tailpipe emissions. And so in some more urban areas, maybe where people are doing more driving within a neighborhood, there are impacts to the people that live in the neighborhood, whether or not they're driving, in terms of air quality. It really depends on what kind of vehicle it is that you're driving, and that's why, right, and so that's why it's focused on vehicles that are 10 years or older, on vehicles with internal combustion engines. The intent is to get the dirtier vehicles off the road.
I think it's
Just
more-
wondering
I mean, you
what the
must get
balance
better
was.
than 40 miles a gallon with yours, with your.
I don't know,
Probably not.
maybe 35. It's pretty good on mileage, but nobody will steal it because it's beginning to get a little rusty, and it's a standard shift.
Yeah, nobody can drive one of those.
No.
But I think the question, this is more about driving the market for EVs than to trying to make an environmental decision on all the factors. So I would say if you're doing everything, you're probably right. But if you're just trying to drive the market to more cleaner vehicles, then it has a benefit.
I'm just raising it because
Yeah, no, it's
I
good.
know people are raising the argument. of,
Sure,
you know,
it's the same, or it's analogous a bit with the e-bike incentive program as well. We know that it's that can reduce emissions, and it's a set of more complicated calculations that has a number of dependencies. So in certain situations, it might be better. In others, it might not. It's just not as straightforward as you might expect.
Nothing in life is.
These mobility cards, like what would be an example in Vermont of how they would use that?
So if public transit goes to fares again in certain areas, they'd be able to use it.
Like with the new fare boxes that GMT might put in, where they could use a card that.
It's
But right now, there isn't anybody using it.
car sharing organizations, so Car Share Vermont in Burlington and Winooski, South Burlington. Bike shops are a lot of the vendors that are listed.
So it'd be like a regular credit card It always,
Yeah.
in certain locations, for sure.
Right. It can be designed in a way that you can only spend it at those particular places. So what we proposed, because there hasn't been a great deal of interest so far, based on the structural issues with the program, and what we proposed is taking $500,000 from the prior appropriation to replace your ride, and using that to encourage more EV adoption among fleets. So being able to stack that for businesses, municipalities, for tax exempt organizations, to be able to stack that with the new Inflation Reduction Act credits at the federal level and get up to $10,000 off the cost of a vehicle. And by doing so, help to create a used vehicle market down the road, knowing that many fleets turn over vehicles more quickly than a personal vehicle. Senator Kitchell's, for example, that might last until 2032.
I may not, but,
So we want to be able to both increase the uptake now, but then also have the ability to have used vehicles that are available later for others to purchase
so
more
could,
affordably.
U-Haul got, they could get,
That's right, and they would be capped at
UPS,
At a
all
certain-
of those,
certain amount.
or do they have to be
Light duty.
Vermont, they've got to be a Vermont-based?
So the design guidelines obviously haven't been written, but I think there's language in there that it has to be a registered business with Vermont.
And it's a light duty truck, so it couldn't be like a moving van, or a moving box. What do you consider a utility vehicle, like the garbage trucks, those kind of things, or?
Yeah, there might be pickup trucks that are used for different municipal services that aren't necessarily, medium duty vehicles.
There are like bucket trucks that are electric, with utilities they're not buying, but those would qualify, or those would be.
That would probably be too heavy and out of the range of the MSRP. Yeah.
Post office just ordered.
So there's a whole, at the federal level, there's also that same clean commercial vehicle tax credit allows for up to 40,000, or the incremental cost, whichever is less on the medium and heavy duty vehicles. So we didn't want to kind of branch too far into that.
Would this be
realm.
available for like the Gopher service at Barry? That's considered a fleet,
If-
like a nonprofit.
So I've just learned of the name of the Gopher service.
Let's go for service.
That was one we learned about yesterday.
The
All the rescues here. It's the
community
community
ride.
rides. I think it's the official name, but they were gonna call it Gopher.
Oh, that's right, okay.
So that's really dependent on what their strategy is and whether the vehicles that they decide to purchase fall below this MSRP cap.
I'm looking at the 60,000, that line, light duty trucks
Mhm.
and utility vehicles. Utility vehicles don't have to be light duty, right? They're
They still have
not
to be under 60,000.
$60,000.
So they could
Yeah,
be.
so it's
So probably a garbage truck would be a
Okay.
lot more. than that.
Forklifts?
there are different like sport utility vehicles that would be under that cap, but might be used in different ways.
Because a police vehicle might be under the MSRP before it's fitted up as a police.
Right. Yeah.
For a Ford Explorer.
There are different enforcement vehicles in Burlington, I think, that
Yeah.
have been purchased.
Watch what's gonna happen 20 years from now, my prediction is you're gonna have everything electric and you're gonna, can't run out of electricity. And how you gonna replace that? It's gonna be.
Wind turbines in the lake, cold chips.
I'll tell you, I don't know where all this electricity is gonna come from, but that's gonna be an issue.
So the e-bike incentive program was launched, as I said, in July of last year, and ran out of money very quickly in September. There was a point of sale rebate and consumer direct, so people had the less expensive options for online retailers. And they could stack that with the utility incentives that exist throughout the state. These were the guidelines that were developed. So there was up to $400 for those lower incomes and $250 for moderate incomes.
Who administers the e-bike program?
This is the same nonprofit, Center for Sustainable Energy.
All right.
And then we put these percentage caps in place to address some of the concerns I think that this committee had about making sure that people weren't getting the entire bike paid for. And we found that there wasn't any bike that was nearly going to be fully incentivized. So we issued 279 incentives at an average of $330. Average bike price was over $2,000. And 70% of that funding went to those with lower incomes. But one of the things we noted was that only 21% of purchases happened at local shops. So the language that you have in the page 479 is, I think, will help direct more of the money that's proposed towards local shops, because it creates a voucher-only system. And so it'll be using that mobility card voucher, which then only can be spent at certain places. So if it be
And you
whitelisted.
proposed that? You proposed that, or the House added it?
The House made the decision to add in more money for e-bikes, and then we worked with
No, I was talking about
Membership,
moving
right.
to the voucher to try to drive more business locally.
that's the discussion that we had with the committee to come up with something that might be more effective.
But my point was, it was something that developed in the House committee
Yes.
as opposed to the agency presenting it.
Right.
Okay, that's all I was trying to
Yep.
figure out the genesis.
You can't take a voucher to an online business, or you could if the online.
You
business
could
signed
if
up.
they participated. Yeah.
They'd have to sign up.
Right. So it's going to limit the amount of those options.
You have to pay they'd have to pay a sales tax, wouldn't they? Our bikes are subject to sales tax.
Yeah.
This gives you a sense of where bikes were incentivized. And then we conducted a survey. Oh, sorry, yeah. So this is looking at incentive funds,
Those are total dollar amounts.
total dollar amounts per 10,000.
Essex, zero. Caledonia.
Oh, they need those electric bikes with the big fat mud tires on
Well, it's gonna solve our noise problem. We won't have to worry about noise anymore.
I know, the more we go to electric vehicles, the less noise.
And motorcycles. Yeah.
What, power bikes, Gazelle, are those names of,
Yeah, these are so in the same way we presented the electric vehicle models, we're presenting just the names of the bike models as well.
oh,
So the Rad Power Bikes is one of those that has more of the cheaper options online. Yes, yeah.
you have a e-bike?
Don't,
So
gee, you can believe that.
Oh,
I only ride my bike for exercise, so getting off the e-bike.
That would work with it.
So we surveyed those
Survey says-
that received an incentive.
they would have purchased it without.
And this was the thing that gave us some pause.
People are being honest.
Yeah.
That's 63%.
That
Thanks for the money. I did it.
I
right.
would have done it anyway.
Yeah, so that's, obviously that's significant, and based upon that, we made the recommendation that if you do move forward with e-bike funding, that that it be instead just focused entirely on the lower income households.
Do away with it
Because
completely.
what we found is that the households are more likely to use it for transportation purposes. They're more likely to see, to use it in order to save money, to not have to spend gas to get around, but make some trips by bike. So there's a clear sort of correlation, and this is backed up by other studies in other parts of the country as well, that those with lower incomes are going to get higher benefits out of an e-bike incentive
So
program.
that's in the House bill to limit
Yes,
it
to
by,
limit it to that lower income.
which is not the case the prior one.
And then there's also language to look at higher amounts for cargo bikes because they have higher potential of reducing greenhouse gas emissions if you have more people on the bike, or if you're able to just make more trips because you have more capacity there.
Have you seen an e-cargo
Yeah, there's just several,
around here?
Yeah. one of my coworkers.
What do they have? It's like a
It has this like
a
kind of,
sidecar or?
it's a bit more like a metal frame for the back. It's longer, so there's more space for so they have that little car. It's like a car seat, but for the cargo bike hooks on. So they take their kid to childcare and on the bike. And then they also can get groceries and put it in that back part. And there's some cargo bikes that even have like, it's almost like a little flatbed.
Yeah, it was,
So my family has an electric cargo bike, and you have space for sometimes 3 boys on the back, and
Wow.
and we are able to not make vehicle trips because of it. And I'm lucky to live in a place where that can be done. It can't be done everywhere in the state. And I think that's kind of the tricky piece about it, is we want to be equitable in the use of our funds, and we want to make sure that we're actually able to get the return on that investment if it could be done in a different way. So we did suggest that because of that, we're funding only those with lower incomes, that we would provide some extra incentive potentially for e-cargo bikes. We did propose to continue the Replace Your Ride incentive and to create this Electrify Your Fleet incentive. There are organizations, municipalities that came to us through the MTI grants, the Mobility Transportation Innovation grants, that sought to do something like this, to use a fleet of e-bikes to do errands around town. So there may be some applications, and we allowed for that with that language. And then Drive Electric Vermont continues to provide information about the existing e-bike programs that continue with the utility, with the local utilities. So Burlington Electric, Stowe, I believe, GMP, they all offer some incentive right now. And that's the gist of it.
Wow, a lot of moving parts.
Sure.
I'm glad I don't have to explain this.
somebody, oh,
Russell's taking notes.
we taking a break then right now?
Yeah.
Because apparently I've got.
I think we're all wrapped up for the morning.
Okay.
We are.
Ready?
Thanks,
Patrick,
Yeah,
very good, very helpful, very good stuff.
Appreciate it.
And even on those emails that I had with Dave
Yes, about the Teslas.
about the Tesla, so yeah, it seems like that customer constituent, even though the MSR, but they, seems like now I agree with what you guys were saying, it doesn't qualify because
Yeah,
really you can't go to the website and see that on there.
the problem that we have, that has come up in the past, and looked at it and we said, I'm sorry, we can't do it because there really isn't the rear wheel drive option anymore. And so so you can't have a Tesla at that price, basically.
But the bill of sale actually says that there is, even though they're paying more, it has an MSRP as if it was.
Yeah, I'm sure that has to do with kind of Tesla's jockeying for things like this for the state.
Right.
Incentive programs in other places where they can kind of sneak in the same way that they lowered some of their prices to take advantage of the tax credits.
Right.
You end up paying more, but.
But it seems to make sense now that I understand.
Yeah, so, I mean, especially if caps are raised, you'll still be able to
But not for people that are.
get the Model 3, but, I think another thing, we didn't talk about it, but another thing is just with the MSRP cap is there are folks, and we see this with all the incentive programs across the country, and a little bit with ours. There are folks that might qualify income-wise, but we don't have any asset or wealth qualifications. So people who have plenty of money, resources to be able to make the purchase still in some cases qualify.
Right, that's why it's good to have an MSRP.
Well, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Yeah,